Reality Bytes. This is Desley Casey, your host.
And Sue Pavlic.
And Sue. And Sue and I have decided today to do a bit of a wrap up. We tried to do a live, but we had major technical issues, so we're pre-recording.
Yes.
Technology is a wonderful thing when it works, but it's a bastard when it doesn't.
I agree.
And that sort of thing. So anyway, so today we thought we'd do a bit of a wrap up of the Australian federal election 2022. And most people will know, probably even around the world these days, that the ALP, the Australian Labor Party, have got into power. Whether they will be able to govern in their own right, or whether they will need to negotiate with the crossbenchers as a minority government, is still up for grabs at this point in time.
Yes.
But hey, Sue, your thoughts being a diehard Labor supporter?
Well, being a diehard Labor supporter, I was extremely happy to wake up Sunday morning and consider the fact that Labor had made it. We made it. Like you said, Desley, it's not in their own right yet. I'm quietly confident that it will be. Mm-hmm. But in saying that, I really don't have a problem with the way that the election did go. Mm-hmm. I believe that Australia made a stand and took out the Liberals at the knees. And I think that was the object of the game. It also sent a message that whilst there is climate wars, so to speak, Australia has spoken. Climate change is important to Australians. Hence, we have so many teal independents winning seats. I think that's a good thing for our government. I think it'll be much more honest and transparent. And the man that was signed in as Prime Minister has a way of joining people together. And I think that this would work.
Yes, it's interesting. You talk about the teal independence, which is a new term that's came up through the actual electoral campaign. Basically, it's a group of independents funded by Simon Holmes à Court, a billionaire, Australian billionaire, who stood for election in various electorates as independents. It's still yet to be determined, isn't it, Sue, whether they actually will vote as a bloc, mm-hmm. Or whether they will, and they may vote as a bloc on some issues, however, mm-hmm. vote independently according to their constituencies in other circumstances.
Yep. I think that, go on there, sorry.
I was going to say, I think Labor, out of the both major parties, is probably the one party that I think will have the best results of negotiating with the Teals as a minority government.
Yeah.
All the hoo-ha from the LNP as such in the election campaign, don't vote for the Teals, it will cause chaos and it will cause, absolute chaos in Australia. I don't believe, and I don't think Australians believe it either, because history tells us, if we go back to the Gillard government, which was a minority government, and they actually successfully negotiated and passed more legislation in her term than any other government had done, I think, up to that time or even since.
Yeah, that's true.
It wasn't as destabilising to the Australian community and the Australian electorate that particularly the Liberal Nationals were trying to make out.
Yeah. I think a stable government is, who's at the helm. And thank heavens we no longer have the bulldozer at the helm. So
We
negotiation will be a little bit easier. It's hard to negotiate if you want it all your way. And, I think that, Anthony Albanese has, he's renowned for that, bringing the Labor Party together after that terrible spill with Rudd Gillard, and the whole schmozzle that was the Labor Party. He was the vehicle that put the party back together to the point where they are today. They are solid. They are a team. He is the type of leader that includes people. And throughout his whole campaign, the strongest message that he put out was that he wants to reunite Australia, reunite the government. We find the common goal and let's all work towards a better outcome. And with that in mind, I think that what we have is not free bad. And, lots of countries around the world function quite well with, a minority government. So,
yes. And the news of today as well is that Peter Dutton has become now the leader of the Liberal National Party, or now known as the opposition party in Australia. Now that, as I said to Sue earlier when we were talking, keep Peter Dutton there as long as possible, because whilst he's there, the electorate do not like him as such, even though, from what I understand, in government circles, he's actually a lot more mellow than what he comes across to the Australian public as such. But the longer they keep Dutton as the leader of the opposition, then I think the longer they will stay in opposition, is my 2 cents worth at this point in time. Maybe he will prove me wrong, or the Australian electorate wrong, and he may be more open to negotiation. Only time will tell, actually.
Absolutely.
I think I do think Labor is better placed to negotiate from a minority government perspective, even though they would like to govern in their own right, and there's still about 10 to 12 seats still in doubt. And interesting enough, Sue, both our seats, which were both Labor, are still actually in doubt as to who's going to get that for different reasons. You in Tasmania and Lyons, and me here on the south coast in New South Wales in Gilmore. Now,
well, I have it on good authority from my Lyons team that we're 7% up front, and they were going through. They're fairly confident that they will retain Lyons.
Yes.
However, unfortunately, we have lost Braddon and Bass, and so that'll be one Labor electorate in the whole of Tassie that's going to make for an interesting situation.
Well, that will definitely make for an interesting situation, won't it?
Yeah. But I have faith in Brian. I think Brian's been around for a while. People trust Brian. And, everything I've heard has been pretty good. Susie's a local girl and has put up a hell of a fight. Right. But I do believe that Brian will hang in the end. So we'll just wait and see. Interesting, though, Miss Josh Frydenberg has conceded the seat of
Oh,
Kooyong.
he has conceded.
He has conceded.
Wow. Now,
So that
Joshi,
puts another, that's Dr. Monique Ryan, is
another
now
Teal
holds
independent.
another Teal independent, yeah, holds the seat of Kooyong,
Mhm.
which really tells you a lot about, you know, where the Liberals have just fallen over, because that's a safe Liberal seat.
Yes.
And it's gone.
Yes. Well, interesting enough, I'm just looking at the tally room now on the Australian Electoral Commission website. The close seats in all states and territories are Gilmore, which is
Yep.
the electorate that I'm in, and in New South Wales, and Deakin in Victoria, which Gilmore was Fiona, the incumbent is Fiona Phillips, the ALP member. She was a first time member in the 2019. And Deakin is held by the Liberals, and they are a little bit too close to call at this point in time. So
I think what I really appreciate a lot about this election is how many women have actually stood up and gone in and have won. And I don't know whether there's any relationship to that and what happened last March in the Justice March. But I do believe that the women of Australia have spoken with
Absolutely.
their feet.
I think that women, particularly women voters, are sick and tired of the male dominance.
Yeah.
And their issues not really getting a proper look in. When you look at the women's issues, you look at how the sexual assaults were handled in Parliament and the uproar about that. When you look at domestic violence issues, what is it? One woman dies
every
9 days.
Every 9 days, yeah.
One woman dies in Australia every 9 days. That's a terrible stat.
That is a terrible stat.
Also, I think that dare I say it, that the women in the former government were very hardline.
Yeah.
Very hardline, liberal.
Yeah, well, you've got your Linda Reynolds, who, you know, really hardline. Michaela Cash, very hardline. You know, Anne Ruston, we very familiar with Anne Ruston and her line. And I suppose when I mention Anne Ruston, I'd like to also mention that, hooray, hip, hip, we are rid of that horrid threat of the cashless debit card.
Absolutely.
I'm very pleased about that.
Now, you and I are basically due for pensions next year, 2023.
Yep.
I think what yours is in March 2023, me is in April. I think we can breathe a sigh of relief that we can access the age pension without the threat of having the cashless debit card over our heads.
Yeah.
Now, it's still, you know, for all the cashless debit card holders out there, be patient.
Yeah.
Labor have only just got in. They've still got to swear in their cabinet as yet. I'll come back to it in a minute about, you know, the quad meeting.
Yeah.
I'd like to touch on that in a minute. So basically, the formal government cabinet won't be sworn in till possibly a week or two.
Yeah.
So, and then they're going to have to, and I know that we're looking at Justine Elliott. Her seat was pretty close, but seems to have, I don't know whether it has resolved as yet, but
I think she'll retain that.
but she was looking to retain the seat for ALP. So Justin Elliott and Julian Hill spearheaded the tabling of the bill last December to have the cashless debit card scrapped. Now that got nowhere because the government stymied the debate on that. So it's not going to be all that hard to bring that bill out. And see where it goes now in the future. So it will take a while.
Yeah, I think people really, need to show a little bit of patience. Things are not going to change for the better for everybody in the next week.
No.
It's going to take some time. We still don't know what exactly the new government has inherited. We can generalize from what we've heard and what we know, but we don't have a clue really in real terms exactly what the new government has inherited. So I ask people to show some patience, and things that were promised will come to pass in time. The ICAC, the housing, all of those things, they will come to pass, but they're not going to happen overnight.
No, and it's very interesting. Getting back onto the Quad, basically what happened is that Scumbo, and I'll still call him Scumbo, basically pulled the election day of the election for the 21st of April, which was Saturday, with the full knowledge that there would be a Quad meeting that the leader would have to go to. We'll have to fly to, for example, Albo had to fly, and Penny Wong, the foreign minister, basically had to be sworn in this morning and fly out late morning to go to Japan for the Quad meeting. Now, if that wasn't a setup of the First Order, I don't know what was. Whether Scumbo just did not even compute that he could possibly lose the election until the last week, where he decided that, yes, he is a bit of a bulldozer, and I'll change.
Spoken like a true
perpetrator, perpetrator of domestic violence, isn't it?
Exactly. I if I had $1 for every time I heard that line during the course of my life, I would be a very, very wealthy woman.
Yes, and
honey, I promise I won't hit you again. Just take me back. That's exactly what he was saying, and Australians didn't fall for it, and I have a renewed, restored faith in the Australian public.
Well, I also think, and I think to be fair across the board, not only did the LNP got trashed in WA, literally, they literally got trashed in WA. But the rise of the Greens, they've got an extra, at this stage, it's still there's an extra Greens MP in the House of Reps. And there are at least 10 Teal independents. Now, most of the Teals trashed the Liberal heartland. But it also goes to show that people in those electorates weren't comfortable enough to vote Labor.
No, and look, I do get that in part. Labor has been rubbished and tarnished as poor economic managers and blah, 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 because people don't actually have the time to sit there and study things and inform themselves. We know that that's rubbish, and historically, Labor is actually the better financial managers. But people, and I think the media is really needs to be held to account here. And I think at some point, the new government will need to address just how much influence the Murdoch media has in our election process. I think that's a valid question. I think that's a question that needs to be answered, because that's all we hear. And people believe what they read and because you're meant to believe what you read and what you hear on the news. You're not meant to, So I don't blame the people, but I just think that, some things need to be addressed with this. And Mr. Murdoch influences our politics. He sells his whatever, makes mega dollars, yet he pays zero tax to Australia. And that's a sore point with me. You want to come here, you want to influence our country, you want to determine how we run our elections, but you don't have the decency to pay your fair share of tax to this country. No.
Well, it's interesting. I don't think it's just up to the media as well. I think people, quite frankly, are sick of the argy-bargies. I think people were also upset and felt that they had more of a say with the Teals when it comes to climate change, even though Labor went into the election with a pretty good climate change policy.
A reasonable policy.
It was reasonable, but the Teals felt it could go better.
Yeah.
I think they did a disservice to Christina Keneally.
I agree.
And the people of Parramatta, and the people of Parramatta spoke very clearly.
Yep.
We will not have politicians parachute, as they're described, into our electorate when they have no idea really of the local issues.
Yeah.
Now, could Christina have actually wrapped her head around the local issues? I think she probably could have, but it went to an independent who, interesting enough, does not align herself with the Teal Independent. She funded her own campaign. Forget what her Christian name is, but surname
Zoe, is it Daniels?
No,
is that the one? No, that's
Lou,
not her.
Lou. She was a local. She was also an ex-mayor of the council.
I know.
Mayor.
Yeah.
And she was, not only did she have the full networks that Christina wouldn't have had a chance to have even remotely built up. That was a very bad call on Labor's part.
It was.
A very bad call. However, the electorate again said, nah, you parachute people in, we're not going to vote for them.
And it just says, I've always, and I'll probably get crucified for this one, but I've always had the opinion that Australians are really laid back when it comes to voting and their responsibility in that. And this election has shown clearly that Australians are very much involved in their democratic process, and they have spoken loud and clear. And WA is just an amazing example of that. We had the ex-Prime Minister stand up and against the WA Premier and side with Clive Palmer over a court case. And then we had them referred to them as some kind of hicks or other because they're in WA. And the people have just said, well, no, that's not how it works. And now he's not there no more. And I think the climate change, whilst we try and deny it, it is a big issue in this country. And people have said this is a big issue in our country.
Interesting enough, where a lot of the change in votes happened, and it also happened in Queensland. The
Yeah,
Greens did extremely well in Queensland,
they did.
as opposed to 2019 when Bob Brown, the then leader, went in and said, we're going to close all your coal mines down, and too bad you're going to be without a job, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And that
Yeah.
backlash not only went back onto the Greens, it also went on to Labor at the time, because
Yeah.
the Liberals have always said if you vote for the Greens, you're voting for Labor. If you vote for Labor, you're voting for the Greens.
Which
Now,
really is a crock.
well, the Greens will keep Labor honest.
But they're not one and the same.
They're not one and the same, but
they're
even
chasms
so.
apart.
So
But they have
yeah.
worked together in the past.
Yes.
And, you know, I mean, I think the whole of the Greens would be a bit surprised at their result. I think they exceeded their own expectations.
Well, they've done very well, particularly. I think there was one in doubt. I don't know whether they took it or it went to the independent in the end, but the seat of Brisbane, whether that was going Greens. They might even get a third member in Parliament at this stage. But also I think under Adam Bandt's leadership, they've recognised they can't just be about climate change. They have to look at, they'll never get a full toehold into the House of Reps if they only look at climate change only.
Yeah, exactly.
They have to look much broader. They had a much broader social housing policy that they wanted to build 1 million homes. Now, interesting enough, with the number of Greens and the independents or the crossbench at this point in time, Labor can, to a degree, cherry pick who they want to negotiate with on what to get there through the House. Now, in the Senate, I'm still waiting with bated breath in the Senate, because with Australia, like most Westminster Western systems, it's got to pass. The bill has got to pass both houses. It can't just pass one.
Yeah.
So the bill has got to pass it. So they've got to potentially negotiate in the House of Reps or the People's House. But if they get it through the House, they've then got to get it through the Senate. So the makeup of the Senate and the crossbench in the Senate is going to prove very interesting as to how much negotiation the Labor Party are going to have to do to get their bills passed by both houses.
Yeah.
So whilst we've been focused on the House of Reps, and even on voting night when they were doing the count, they were only given the count for the House of Reps, and that was like a dog's breakfast. Absolutely like a dog's breakfast. And they said it's just too difficult to try and provide the numbers because it's even more of a dog's breakfast for the Senate.
Yeah.
Now,
I think, though, because, you know, Labor isn't proposing any radical. I mean, they went in with a fairly modest plan. They weren't over the top. So they're really, I don't know that that's going to have that much of a problem negotiating in the Senate, because they don't have any outrageous programs. So I think negotiation would be easier, because the things that they've got that they want to change are going to be, you know, you've got ICAC and things like that. They're going to be things that are going to be supported. They're things that everybody wants. You know, higher productivity, better, you know, those sorts of things are things that everybody's going to want. So there's going to be a fair bit of common ground, unlike with the coalition where you had things like robo-debt or the cashless debit card, which were radical changes that hurt people. Negotiation becomes difficult.
Yes, and the thing is that even though they negotiated it, the crossbench at the time still voted for those radical.
Yes, they did.
So this is why it's also very important to see what the makeup of the Senate is
Yeah.
in its final makeup,
Yeah.
as to what, you will have a certain number of ALP, you'll have a certain number of Liberals, and you'll have a certain number of Greens. It's the others. And to my understanding, Teal Independents did not stand for the Senate.
No.
They stood for the House of Reps.
But Jackie Lambie has got a bit of a growth in the Senate.
Yes.
So that'll be interesting.
Yes.
And again, I think it's the finding of common ground.
Well, it is, but I think there's a lot more negotiation. But I think we need to, and even today, they're not really giving the numbers of the Senate.
No.
And traditionally, that's usually the case because it takes a lot longer to do the count in the Senate.
Yeah.
The first point of order is who is going to be the governing party in the House. That's the most important because they're the ones that actually produce the legislation.
Yeah.
So,
but speaking on the Senate, what a paper it was to vote on.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. Like, what a mind-boggling exercise, really.
Yeah, it was rather interesting. There were parties there I've never heard of.
Same.
But it was like the House of Reps. Like, there were 7 candidates in Gilmore for the House of Reps. And
we had 8. Some had 10.
Yeah, we had 7. And quite frankly, I only knew 2 of them, which was Fiona Phillips, the incumbent, Labor MP, if she does get in, and Andrew Constance, who was the Liberal candidate. Now, he's putting up a bit of a tough fight in the seat of Gilmore, which, interesting enough, Gilmore was the only electorate in the 2019 that Labor won from the Liberals. It was the only seat that went from Liberal to Labor because it was a blue ribbon seat up till 2019 and subsequently has become a marginal seat, which has proved itself in this election. And I think what I want to do is just have a look, results by division. And I'm just going to try and bring up Gilmore at this stage because they're still saying it's too close to call.
Gilmore.
So at the moment, 306
in Constance Way.
In Andrew Constance. So there's only 306 votes in it as yet.
Which is really, bugger all.
Well, I'm just going to look at a bit more of the breakup. So we had an independent, we had a Greens, we had a United Australia Party, we had a Pauline Hanson, and she got 3,600 votes in Gilmore. And
wow.
UAP got 2,500, so it'll be interesting to see where their votes go. But
well, we know where the UAP votes will go.
Yeah. And then the Liberal Democrats, and then we had Labor. But the only 2 people I knew were Andrew and the Liberals and Fiona Phillips. Now, Andrew basically is a ex-New South Wales state Liberal politician. And he's the guy that told Scumbo that he got what he deserved and how he by the people of Cobar during the bushfires.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people, I think it was like there was something a bit of a short. And for the first time, they actually had TV ads for Andrew Constance and Fiona Phillips. I've never seen that in a federal election before, where local MPs or candidates were actually advertising on TV. That's how.
Yeah.
That's how. Now, Andrew has a lot of good standing. Problem is, what some people said, it's the leader. They like the man, they just don't like his leader.
Yeah. And I think that's been, that's what Australia voted against, really. I think Liberals would have fared far better had they have not had Scott Morrison at the helm.
It may have been a much closer
Yeah.
race than
Yeah.
what it
And
was.
and at this point, I'd just like to mention that this is only the fourth time since the war that Labor has won government from the opposition.
Yes.
That's worth noting. And the other thing that I find extremely inspirational is the person that now wears the badge of our Prime Minister came from a single mum on a disability pension from the housing flats. Now, Australia, if that doesn't inspire you in this country that you can achieve anything you want to, then I don't think anything will. To come from such humble beginnings and to end up at the top of the tree is a huge achievement. And I think that's inspirational for all our young, for all our poor. Don't give up. You can do whatever the bloody hell you put your mind to.
Yes, but we also have to bear in mind, and I don't disagree with you, but when Albo was growing up and he went to university, he had free university.
Yes, and that was a Labor government policy.
That's right, but
I'd like to see us go back to that at some point in the future.
I very much doubt that we will, but we have even successive Labor governments since that policy came in have kept the tertiary paid tertiary system. So so there's aspects there that he had, and he puts it down to good government at the time, which is quite true.
Yeah.
We are now, I agree, anyone can aspire to whatever they want to, and that. I think there's still a few roadblocks that young people have to negotiate in order to achieve those aspirations. One of them is get rid of the cashless debit card, particularly for young people, and particularly for tertiary, youth allowance, because they just can't complete their studies, their university studies on that. That's proved a dismal failure for young tertiary students. That's been a major roadblock. Some of our most brightest young people have had to give up their university studies because of the cashless debit card. And
I think that's removing those barriers and actually supporting. And I think this is where, when Albanese says no one held back and no one left behind, I think that's what he speaks of, is opening up those doorways so people can fulfill their aspirations. And, I don't know whether we'll go back to the days of free tertiary, but I'd like to see some kind of, I did my BA in 83 as a mature age student, and I got it for free on those grounds. So, there are ways around these things, and a good government finds ways to invest in their people. And one thing that this Labor government talks about a lot is investing in the people. That's where our future is. That's where our economy is, our productivity is in our people.
Well, yes, but I'm going to put a rider there. There's a saying, talk is cheap. So now Albo has not only got to talk the talk, he's got to walk the walk. And that is what is going to be, how would you put, assessed on?
Yep.
As to how much he does walk the walk. Now, I agree. We don't know what he's inherited.
No.
At this stage. We don't know. I know there's a lot of things he wants to do. We don't know the speed of what he can do. We don't know at this stage the complete makeup of the Senate to see what type of negotiations may have to come into play. So there's a few unknowns, quite frankly, at this stage. But I think it's one thing to be able to promise everything, but now he's got to keep those promises. Now it's going to turn out, is he a man of his word?
Well, you know, you don't, I'll go back to my foreline is you don't get to keep a seat for 26 years if you don't, you know, serve your people. And he has said many a time that he is ready to serve. He has served his constituents for 26 years and they are happy with him. And I'm sure that Australia will be too.
True.
But I warn that we need to be patient.
I think we do need to be patient. And I'm not saying don't be patient. What I am saying is that sometimes there's promises, you know, look, we got lots of promises in the elections. We got it, and LNP gave lots of promises in 2019 and did none of them. I had no intention of doing any of them, quite frankly. It was just a promise. Yes, and you could say the same thing. Scumbo got back into his seat. He serves his people too. So, you know, but when it comes to being Prime Minister, we don't know what limitations at this point, because we don't know what they're inheriting fully.
Yeah.
As to whether those promises, how many of those promises can be kept. That's all I'm saying. And yes, we do have to be patient. I absolutely agree with you there. But there's things that we, you know, for example, if you take the Uluru Statement of the Heart, absolute promise, came out in his victory speech, everything like that.
Yep. But look, that's going to have to go to referendum.
That's exactly right. Now, the problem with referendums is that I think it's good 80% of them never get passed.
Yeah, but that won't then be the fault of this government. They have promised that they will, you know, implement that in full. But it has to go to a referendum.
That's
and therefore the people of Australia will have the final say on that.
But how would you feel?
He will be putting it to the people.
Yes, he will be. Yeah, I agree with you. He's putting it to the people. But I'm talking about, there could be a limitation there, that even though he wants to implement it in full, if the Australian people reject that referendum, he can't fulfill that promise because of that limitation.
Yep.
You see what I'm getting at?
That's right. That's yes, you are right. But the fact that it isn't him holding it back.
No,
it's not. You know, he wants to, and he's going to put it out there. If the Australian public says no, that's not what we want, then that's the Australian public's decision to do that.
That's right, but it's a limitation.
It is a limitation.
Remember, it's a promise to the Aboriginal population that he will implement in full. Now, he can only take it to referendum and choose the dates carefully, and they're looking at May 2024 or 23, 23, and or May 2024. I think they're the two different, to try and prepare the Australian people. Now, I'm not saying that the Australian people will say no. What I am saying is he can only implement and deliver that promise to a particular degree. Up to then, it's out of his hands, but he can't implement it in full if the Australian people say no. So in other words, I think now this happens on both sides. He would have been better to say that we will ensure, we promise to ensure a referendum is held. Full stop.
You're right.
You see what I'm getting at? He's kept his promise, but then it's up to the Australian people. But both sides of Parliament do this. They make these broad, sweet promises, and then there's a limitation of their potential limitation of some degree can come in. Now, I'm not disagreeing with the referendum. I'm not disagreeing that he has the right intent of wanting to implement it in full. My problem is he's made a promise that he may not be able to fully keep.
I understand what you're saying. I do. And like you say, past referendums have not gone to as we would expect them to. But, it depends on how it's worded. A few referendums have fallen over purely on the wording.
Well, I think they've been working on that for a number of years. I was listening to, I don't know whether it was the Drum or 7:30 report, one of those ABC reports, could have been the Drum, where they were talking about the referendum. That's where I got the years May 2023, May 2024 from, you know what I mean? And they've been working with, High Court barristers and goodness knows what to make sure the wording is right. Doesn't matter how you word things in a sense, some people will always take it the wrong way.
But I've seen, I'm trying to think of which one, whether it was the Republican one or not. But I've been alive for a couple of referendums and they've fallen over in particular because of the way they were worded. And
it's either or. But anyway, I just wanted to raise that point about politicians need to be more judicious, I believe, in how they phrase their promises, because that's what the Australian electorate decide. Because if they say, yes, okay, but you promised us and you haven't kept your promise, doesn't matter whether he's of high integrity or not, and he is an integral man, I do accept, you know what I mean, and that sort of thing. If you get too broad sweeping, and that's just only one classic example through it. Aged care is another. There's 5 pillars to aged care, but it came out in the election, well, okay, we can't do everything at once. It came out in the campaign. So they had to kind of backtrack a bit. So that's what I'm saying about, he didn't come out with a lot of, he really didn't come out with any major controversial policies per se. It was more about how he promised things that it is what he's going to be, put a blunt word on, what he's going to be judged on.
And I get what you're saying, and no, you can't fix everything, and no, you can't fix everything straight away. Again, we go back to what do they inherit? I mean, for all we know, it could make it almost impossible to push any change through, depending on they inherit.
That's exactly right. And that's what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. We don't know the limitations at this point in time.
Yeah.
Or what the potential limitations are. And I think he was trying to be careful. He was, I think, a lot more careful than Scumbo, quite frankly, who was promising the earth and everybody knew he'd deliver none of it. You know, it'd just go to big business and he's, you know.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing that I found, if we go back to a man of humble beginnings, he had nothing to say about job seeker. He had nothing to say about age pensions except for the cashless debit card. He had nothing to say.
Yeah, I agree with you. Pension. I agree with you completely on that. And then I look at the side, okay, if he got up and he said, well, we're going to lift up job seeker to a livable wage, and same with the other payments, can you imagine the outrage that he would have faced in the current climate where we are $1 trillion in debt? They would have flogged him till the cows come home and he wouldn't have even had a show in. So I
don't disagree with you there, but I think you also got to bear in mind that they're the people who are the most vulnerable in our society.
Yeah, they are.
They are the people who should not be left behind.
No, and I'm sure that they won't be left behind. If he
had said and committed to, we will review the payment structure.
And I think he did say that at one stage.
No, he didn't.
That it would be reviewed.
No.
And Jim Chalmers also said that these things will be reviewed in time, and they will.
Yeah, but not in this, from what I understand, it's not in this election cycle.
Well, again, I dare say that, you know, the first budget will be August, between August and October. I think I'll hold my judgment till then, because by that stage they will know what they will inherit.
Yes.
And by that stage they will have a much clearer idea as to where they go from there in the next. And I would not be surprised if you know, those things came up then.
Yeah, I'm just pointing these things out because I think I'm trying to be fair here, not only to Albo, because I think he did it was an interesting campaign from Albo. And I'm reminded of his saying, don't interrupt your opponent while they're making a mistake.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he had he's human. He had his gaffes, or, you know, and everything else like that. I'm not saying that I agree with, I couldn't wait to get rid of Scumbo, quite frankly. We couldn't, I personally don't feel we could have done another 4 years or three years with Scumbo in office.
No.
And that sort of thing. And but I'm a little bit more open about, well, hold on, we need to have some checks and balances here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes, he's a nice man. I haven't met him in person, but he seems a nice man. I was quite impressed how he could deliver a speech to the Australian Press Club without looking at his notes once. I was also quite impressed on how he could deliver his victory speech without looking at his notes once. So
because I think that
he must border on having from the heart. Absolutely, but I also think he must have a photographic memory.
Yeah, I think he's look, I've said this number of times. He's a man of integrity. And that's something we're not entirely used to amongst our politicians. And he's a man of his word. His word is his bond. And I have met Albo briefly, but look, I caught the man. The first time I saw Albo speak was a budget reply, and he won me then with the vision for Australia. I haven't, I've seen nothing since that time that has said to me, well, hang on, he's not being genuine, he's not being honest, there's something amiss here. I don't get that from him. I think he will work. He does work. He's the hardest working politician that we've seen. A man done 4 states in a day, for heaven's sake. You know, you don't get that every day. He's a hard worker. He's honest. He's genuine. He speaks from the heart. Now, they're 4 pretty good qualities in a PM. Sure, he's going to make mistakes. It's his first time. And he's not perfect. He's not a machine. He is human. And I think if we're patient, I said some time ago, we're on a precipice of something new and great, and I still believe that. And this election has firmed that for me, in the sense that we've got so many more women involved, we have so many more independents involved, and we have a man that's the leader that can work with people, that will join people together, that will look for a common cause. And I think that they're all good things. And that's all I've got to say on that one.
And on that note, this is Desley Casey and
Sue Pavlic saying good night.
Good night. Thank you for
Be kind to each other.
Yes, thank you for watching and listening, and hope you have a great day wherever, or evening, wherever you are in the world. Bye for now.